Hello and welcome to a new episode at Mindset Mastery. I'm your host, Ahmed Assaf, and today we have an amazing guest, Mike LaRusso. How are you, Mike, today?
Very good, Ahmed. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Mike is a sales professional, as you know, that more than 25 years in the domain,
Yeah, a lot more.
and today, a lot more. So today, we are diving into sales, and this podcast is directed to everyone who wants to know more about the sales and how could we close the sales and what are the strategies to use and lots of tips to take from this episode. So if I'd like to start with you, people would buy either gain from profit to gain a profit or to avoid a loss. That's why they buy. What is your perspective on that?
Well, let me, if I could, give you just an overview first,
Sure,
and it'll lend into my perspective and philosophy on sales, what I've done, and we can lead into the book and how that relates.
sure.
I'm going to use the term consultant only because it's a professional term, but I've done a lot of consulting work for companies, and the main objective is to bring in new sales revenue.
Hmm.
Now, typically, they just assume you're going to come in and find new accounts, prospect, sell new accounts, sell the product. But there's a lot of ancillary types of functions that affect a sales professional doing that. So if I went into a company just purely to find out how they can generate new revenue, there's basically four pillars that I deal with. It's number one, data analysis. So I look at the data within the company, the operations and sales collaboration between those departments, the structure of the sales department, and then lastly, what I call new business development, which is more of what you're referring to right now, bringing on new business. Now, what's interesting about it is new business development or just sales, let's just say sales, is completely dependent on operations. Now, that may seem counterintuitive, but there's too many things within an organization that can affect a sales professional from operating and doing what their natural talent is. So those are the things that have to be addressed. And what's interesting is if I go into an organization, I'll sit and I'll meet with the upper management just to get an idea of what they think's going on. And if you could just picture, if you picture a grid with a square with four cells, and on the one side, it's what management thinks is going on, and it's either good or bad. And on the top, it's the reality of what's actually going on within the organization, and that's good or bad. And then you cross-reference the boxes. Now, you
Hmm.
speak to management. If they say things are good and you find out that they really are good, then your focus is, like I said, on new business development. And that could be bringing on a new product, opening up a new channel, just a new offering, growth, a new offering. But if management thinks things are bad and you see that they're really good, then that goes right to a data analysis, that they're misinterpreting all the data within the organization. So that would be your main focus. Now, if they think things are good and they're really bad, then it's 100% I'm sorry, the sales structure is too limiting. I'm sorry, the operations is getting in the way of doing sales. And then lastly, if they think things are bad and they really are bad, then it's 100% the sales structure is completely stifling. And that comes down to leadership, a toxic environment, and that's the toughest scenario to change things. So if you're looking first at the structure, then you can lead into how do you go about and make sales within those typical structures. Now, as a consultant, I would go in and I would isolate which are the main goals, which are the main objectives, and then change them
Hmm.
or offer to change them as long as they're open to it. Now, as it relates to the book, the last thing, new business development, is the majority of the time how I was hired. And a company would either have a new product, a new territory they wanted to open, or a new distribution channel. And I would be hired to do one of those three things. A lot of the time, they didn't know which one they wanted until I got in and I could recommend which one. Um, and I'm getting to the point of doing sales for profit or for gain. Um, in these situations, I was usually on a 6-month contract. So I had to prospect in a way that I could produce quickly because I was limited to 6 months. And you've probably come across all the typical prospecting methods, the cold calling, the knocking on
Yeah.
100 doors, et cetera. Those are the things they put on you. And a lot of the times they focus on because they don't know anything else. I'm talking about management. But the problem with that on a 6 month contract is it just takes too long. I would have to go into an organization, learn the organization, the product, who's the typical customer, find them and sell them. You can't do that in 6 months. So over the years, and you said 25 years, it's closer to 40. I might as well
Oh my
let the cat
God.
out of the bag. So in a positive way, it gave me a lot of experiential information to work with. So I had to come up with my own ways of prospecting that produced quickly. And I did that in a way, it was mostly intuitive. And I did it my entire career. And then roughly a few years ago, I decided to formalize those steps and put it in a book. So sales professionals can use this and see a different way to prospect and hunt for new business. And that's the book, The Sales Professional Survival Guide. And where we are now in the modern sales environment is sales professionals have to overcome a myriad of obstacles to do basic things like develop new business. One of them is in the book, you'll see how I can, a different way of prospecting, hunting for new business, which produces very rapidly, as opposed to the typical ones. But beyond that, I also explain how to overcome functional obstacles within an organization. And a lot of them are what I mentioned earlier. Operations is stifling, mandatory sales practices, which are just doomed to fail. And other things you can just think of. So I address the basics and then I tell you how to overcome them if you are allowed to implement them. And that's really where we are now. It isn't as simple as you want to sell something to add value to a customer or make money for yourself. It's a little bit more complicated than that. Unfortunately, it's gotten a little bit more complicated.
And comparing what's going on in the market, being like in the 40 years in this domain, what are the changes that AI had helped through the sales and just make it go forward?
I'm going to use IT more than just AI
Okay.
because I'm actually focusing on AI as it relates to a lot of these things.
Mm-hmm.
I hate using the term, but I might as well. You've heard with data, garbage in, garbage out. The same thing also comes into play with the methods that you're employing. So something like you've heard of CRM databases,
Yes.
Salesforce, et cetera. They have the potential of being unbelievably productive. But if you're starting out with the wrong concepts and putting the wrong rules in place, then it's just automating stupidity.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And
Yes.
that's where we are now, is it's more of if sales was taking control of a salesperson's activity, now they're just automating that control. Whereas where you were mentioning AI, artificial intelligence, and as it relates to what I said earlier, that prospecting time is key. They can take up AI can be it can be formed to take up a lot of that wasted time.
Mm-hmm.
As an example, if you do basic cold calling, and I'm going to throw numbers out because these are the numbers that are talked about. If you make 100 calls a day or knock on 100 doors, these are things you hear as the regular mantras. That uses X amount of time and only produces a small percentage. Now, as a sales professional, you have to knock on the doors. And then once you get the one appointment, then you have to go on the appointment. And all of that takes up time. Now, if make the calls or the knocking on doors, quote unquote, is done in an automated fashion, then the sales professional is just operating with the results of that. And they're not putting their time into it. So then it can make sense to do that type of randomization prospecting because you're not using up your time to do it. Does that
Okay.
make sense?
Yeah. And now most of the people that the audience will be in the sales domain. They will be talking, let's talk about directly to the sales managers. How could they benefit from this book or from your strategies and start applying them to empower their
The
teams?
the main way, and there'd be, kind of attitude adjustments that would absolutely be necessary.
Mm-hmm.
And when you say sales manager, I'm going to use that as a generic. Anyone who can control a salesperson's time, in my book, I label management. And that could even be somebody who's not your supervisor because they control some aspect of what you're doing. And again, back to the AI, they can, or IT, they can come up with some new thing that you have to do as a salesperson that they used to do because it makes
Mhm.
their job easier. But it's using up, again, you're using up your time. But related to that, and I'm going to use the term that the process is called the alliance process. So I'll just use that as the concept. The way it would be, first of all, the alliance process compared to typical prospecting methods for new businesses, it's exponentially faster, exponentially more powerful in closing the sale because it's quicker to an appointment and it's a more powerful appointment, okay, as opposed to a typical cold calling type of appointment. So the way you would get, sales managers can see really fast return on their investment if they implement this. Now, to change their attitude toward a new way of prospecting would be the metrics. And I have an entire section on analytics, comparing existing ways of prospecting new business to the new way. And just to throw it out there, I have a production power metrics I use as one of the equations. And typical prospecting methods, and the numbers are meaningless, just more of the equation, comes to about 1%. It's a 0.0125 power metrics. My way, the alliance process is virtually a 2. So 2 compared to 0.0125. So it's 200% compared to basically 1%. So it's 200 times more powerful in terms of the framework of getting to the appointment and closing the sale. And you've heard the term networking, I'm sure, right?
Yeah.
It mirrors networking in the way that the main difference between this and prospecting and cold calling is you're hunting for people who have access to your targets rather than going after random businesses.
Yeah,
And
but
that gives you a leg up.
you talk about something so essential and the success of the sales, which is the attitude and the identity. Could you tell us this
Yes.
more? And if you touch how did you explain that in
Okay.
your book?
Let me, and I'm so glad you asked that because none of this matters if the foundations aren't in place.
Hmm.
And, just like if you talk about an individual person who wants to change their mindset on life, a lot of it is attitude positive, but it's also goal setting, things like that. If you took those concepts and you added it to applied it to an organization, and that is the key difference. I have in the book the foundation of the alliance process, something called tactical prospecting, and that's kind of like the generic foundation. The basis of that is what I call tactical mentality, and that is if the attitude of an organization, meaning every department, even non-sales department, if they're all designed to help do sales, close sales, promote sales as their functionality, then you could increase revenue 10%, 20%, 30% just by setting up an attitude change within the separate departments. If inventory understood the importance of being able to get the product out to the salesperson quickly, or if the IT department made a lot of these things, the CRM or the functions, in a way where it benefits the salespeople, doesn't hamper them. Just basic things. If your mindset is we have to do sales, just that change, that one little tick to the side of sales are the most important thing in an organization. Imagine that increases revenue 20% a year, and it's $100 million company.
Yeah.
You've just gained $20 million, all profit now because there was no costs involved. It's all margin, and they didn't have to enter a new market, launch a new product, buy a new warehouse. It's all just a change in attitude. And of all the things that over the 40 years that I've seen that destroy companies, that's the main thing. And it seems kind of generic. How do I change an attitude? But it's really starting out with the attitude and then changing the functions that aid sales. I'll give you a perfect example, and I use this all the time. If you ask employees in an organization, generally speaking, what's the most important thing in a business to make it grow and thrive and the employees thrive? Most of the time they will say sales, doing sales, bringing in sales revenue. But if you ask the same employees, who are the most important employees in the organization, none of them are going to say the sales employees. The sales employees will be the back of the line. And that's the attitude adjustment where, and this also relates to prospecting.
Mhm.
And it comes down basically to this, that if management, and I say management again, generically, if management starts out with a negative view of sales, then all the strategies devised are based on control. But if they start out with a positive view of sales, it's based on trust. And once it's based on trust, now you allow sales talent to emerge and they can do what's natural to them and be creative and use my technique. So if you walk by a salesperson's desk and they're not making repeated wasted phone calls, they're actually thinking and contacting individuals who can help them develop business, that would be okay.
Yeah. And here's the thing that I would love to highlight about, because as you said, companies is about departments. I see it, it's two departments. They're sales and other departments helping the sales department. And there's lots of training, lots of books, lots of things about sales and being successful salesman, and sales is the best return. And but through your studies, I want to know more about the science of the mind and the behavior, and how the salesman should understand himself and understand the mind, how it works, so he can be a very
Okay.
successful sales professional. Because most of the training, they never go to that point, which is the major point from my perspective. I don't know if you agree with me.
100%. And I'll give you the actual perspective on it, is that sales is a talent. Okay, so and there's a level of, I don't want to say a level of intelligence, but I'll give you a better example. All the trainings that you've probably come across or you see or hear about, it's so funny. They all, and I've been through, I can't even tell you how many.
40 years.
They always start with the salesperson sitting in front of the customer, and then they start the training. They never describe or explain or teach how you get in front of the customer in the first place because they don't know prospecting. So they use the typical things like the 100 calls a day, and it's all pie in the sky numbers because they don't make any sense if you actually break down the analytics. Okay, but um, what I have in the book, I mentioned networking. Okay. The difference between the alliance process and networking is meeting people and trying to get, target information out of them. But the difference with networking is you're dealing with random people. Okay. So some of them are going to have information for you, some of them aren't. And again, there's a time wasting element to it. In the alliance process, you're looking for individuals, you're hunting for people who have what I call a business development mindset. And there's a way to measure that as well in the book. But as it relates to what I would say to a salesperson is it's in the fiber of I don't want to say natural born salespeople, but people who have a talent for sales or a talent for building business. It's in their fiber to do deals, regardless of the
Mhm.
product. So if you're doing something that helps you do deals, that's what you would focus on. When you go to a sales training and they stick you in front of a customer in a role play, every type of sales training, it's so funny. I don't teach this at all in terms of once you're in front of the customer, because typical sales trainings are designed for a typical pain point, an obstacle you have to overcome. And everyone has their individual method to overcome an individual, and you can't anticipate every obstacle. So
Exactly.
really what it comes down to is I show you how to get in front of the customer. And then once you're in front of the customer, it's thinking on your feet. Because now you're going to consultative selling and you're going to find out what it is to do business and what they're looking for. And then you're going to figure things out. And that's not something that you really, except for that aspect of it. You're not going to train that, but you're going to train to say it's okay to think. You
Mhm.
don't need rote responses to what to do. And you've heard the acronyms, different types of selling techniques and
Yeah.
and it's silly because what if that one doesn't come up? You taught me how to close the holes in the rabbit fence. That's one of them over the years. It's like, but wait a minute, I didn't come across an obstacle that can be applied to. What do I do now? Twiddle my thumbs? What? Yeah, so, but if I discussed it with the individual and I saw they are looking for or can determine, then I can apply my solution to what they're looking for. I'm thinking on my feet. So for us, if I had to give a sales professional one piece of advice is you're there to do business development. You're not there to fool the customer. You're not there to persevere and bully them. You're doing business with another business person. How can you create value for them? You have to find out what they need first to create value, and then you apply your offering to them. I hope that wasn't too
Yeah, no, that's
textbook.
really, I mean, that's what I want to let
Mhm.
the audience know, because it's not about the amount of training you make. It's not about the how much you practice your presentation, because it's always there's new things, there's new.
Can I give you a quick example?
Yeah, sure.
This is one of the biggest deals I ever closed. And I was relatively new. I was much younger, but and I was relatively new to the industry. And I always use this example because it was perfect for what I just explained to you. It was the second largest real estate management company in New York.
Hmm.
They managed 300 buildings, which was enormous. And I was in you remember what a pager is, a beeper? That shows you how old I am, but way back when. And they needed pagers for the maintenance person for the building and the management person for the building. And they were calling on all the competitors. And I hunted my way and got in. And we were a smaller company, so they didn't know us from Adam. And I got in, and finally, I was the last person in to meet the COO. And he had been through, I don't know, half a dozen of these things. And, I don't know if you've ever met someone from New York beside me, but they wear their emotions on their sleeve. And if something's bothered them, they just cut right to the chase. And he was just, he was done. He was fatigued with this interviewing these companies. And I got in. So that was the most important part. I prospected and got my way in. I walked into his office and he said, look, I'm going to make it easy on you. If you can generate a separate bill for every building, the 300 buildings, and as long as the product works, then you'll probably have a sale. And he goes, every other company I've had in here can't do that. Now, I was new to the industry, and my first thought process was, I probably can't do that either then.
Because
It's my
they
same
couldn't.
company.
Yeah,
If they couldn't.
I
Now,
can.
when you explain a thought process, and it may take a split second in your mind, but this
Hmm.
is what happened in a split second in my mind. And it relates to thinking on your feet. And my first thought was, I can't do it either. And then it hit me. And it's like, if I was a Superman salesperson and I sold 300 separate businesses this month, that would be 300 separate bills. And they'd be giving me awards. So I just said, yes, we can do that without even speaking to my company. And I gave them some demos to use. And I'll be honest with you, I went back, I got the deal eventually because of that. That was the main thing, besides the product work. But I was able to do, because the buildings are all separate entities themselves. They're all individual corporations, so they needed
Hmm.
separate bills. And all these other large vendors wouldn't do it for the same reason I ran into, because when I went back to the office, they wanted to chop my head off. They said, "What are you crazy? 300 separate." And I said the same thing. If 300 people walked into here today to buy our product, you'd sell it to them. It was 300 separate pages. But my point is, what sales training could teach you that? That's just thinking on your feet. There's no close the holes in the rabbit fence or
Just
or
listen.
whatever you saw from all the sales movies. It's
Yeah.
thinking on your feet. So I'll give you what it comes down to. Here's another piece of advice for salespeople, and it's going to make every sales trainer cringe. 90% of every deal is closed during the prospecting, not during the selling. Okay, so during the prospecting, especially the way I teach in the book, is you get the right type of customer who's has the ability to buy the product, the need to buy the product, and matches what you're selling. And then that's 90% of it. The other 10% is just negotiation.
You
So if
make
you
it
go the
so
other way and you
simple.
do
You make it so
what's that?
simple and just you make it so simple and direct to the point. It's all about prospecting, how to prospect in the right way,
Right.
and how to have that right mental attitude. And then you can close so easily. So we talk about this mindset, sales mindset, and we talk about those leadership core values that you should have. And now if we talk about the identity of a salesman, what would be his identity look like? If someone, okay, I want to be in the sales, but I don't know why, but I don't know how. What would be the identity of a professional salesman?
Okay, think of it this way. This is, I think, the best way to answer. Um, is don't think of a salesperson, just think of any person.
Hmm.
Okay. What would be the qualities of any person who can do what I just explained? It would be somebody who has, again, what I have in the book called a business development mindset. But let's take it back. What is that really? I mean, I can explain it in the book and I do in depth, but you've read people who are always what we call in New York moving and shaking and cutting deals and finding opportunity. It's really, okay, that's a better phrase. They can identify they can identify an opportunity, they can engage an opportunity, and they can negotiate an opportunity.
Hmm.
That's what a sales professional looks like. Now, that could be, and I'm sure you've run into it, people who aren't in sales who have those abilities,
Yes,
right?
I've seen that.
And
Yeah.
then, trust me, I've worked with many, many, many salespeople. A lot of them don't. And they've worked their entire career by all the advantage they gained from the organization that other sales professionals don't have. And I explain that in the book as well as in my consulting. What's funny is, without getting into the weeds of the book, but a lot of the methods that are within the alliance process, some of these successful sales professionals are utilizing, but they don't even realize.
Hmm.
It's just luck of the draw that they're able to get some of these advantages. I've worked, and I can almost say this definitively, of every organization I've worked for as a consultant directly over the 40 years, if you took the top sales professional in every one of them, top producing, none of them were doing any of the prospecting that are forced upon everybody else. Okay, because they had those separate advantages, which I formalize in the book.
Hmm.
Now, the problem is what it comes down to what you said. It's what are the attitudes of the supervisors to
That's the
get
main
them to
thing.
believe this, which runs into the other human nature problem that sales professionals run into, and it relates to the problem. A sales professional is in a performance-based compensation profession. So they get compensated and paid on how they perform. All right, that's a good portion of their income, but they're being controlled by people, managers who are in a guaranteed salary position, who get paid no matter what you do. So
And that
they're
that's
protect they're protecting their end and it's affecting yours. And that's
that,
where the conflict comes.
yeah, and that's a great opportunity to explain that law is the law of compensation. It's you'll earn just exact ratio of the need of what you do, how the ability to do it, how much are you able to master to do whatever you're doing, and the difficulty there in replacing you. So the only thing is that under your control is to master what you do. So if you love sales, and even if you don't know about the sales, I would advise you to just start reading this book, The Sales Professional by Mike, because it have lots of concepts and lots of tactics that you will apply daily in your life. It will help you not only professionally but personally also, because it's going deep to the professional and about selling and about the management and the most important thing, the psychology. It will let you understand your mind, and everything starts with your mindset. So what would be your last message to the sales team or the salesman?
Well, as it relates to what you just said as well, I can be contacted directly as a consultant, and I'd be willing to give just some free advice in the beginning and some information
Sure.
on because I've been over the years. A lot of what I've done is they call up and they explain the problem before I even took the job, the consultant job. But the main thing, like I said, is it's two things. It's knowing that doing business deals, looking for opportunity is the key to sales and selling. That's that's the main thing. The second thing is um, you have to determine what type of environment you're operating in, and then overcome the obstacles that you're faced there, which they're going to be. Okay, unless of course the entire attitude of the organization can change to a point where uh, they see sales as the most important thing within the organization.
We are living in ocean of opportunities. Just you have to have a different level of awareness to look around and find the abundance and prosperity in this world. Thank you, Mike, for this amazing episode. And looking
Appreciate it,
forward.
Ahmed.
Thank you.
Okay, take care.